Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play set in the Eberron campaign world. It's Friday, so we have a Khyber Shards Answers question, where we take some questions from our viewers. If you'd like to submit questions for Khyber Shards Answers, you can over on our Discord, which you can find in the description below. You can find a link to that, as well as we will take questions from comments on recent videos. I always go back and check those before we record them. So this week, obviously, we have Casey, player of Shade, the foxiest of shifters. So this week, we went into the Feywild. We've been leading up towards going into the Feywild. I had asked the players what their interest was in Feywild exploration, and in all of these things, leading the cheering section for, yes, let's go to the Feywild, has been Casey. Not to say anyone else was reluctant, but very much Casey. So Casey, why? What is it that you just love about the Feywild?
I love the chaos. I love that. I mean, it's one of the reasons I love D&D is that anything can happen. Right? You can run into anything, create anything. It's just, I enjoy that unexpected and that open, sandbox type thing. Build what you want, do what you want. And the Feywild is just to the nth degree of that. Anything can happen. Are there rules in the D&D world? They're broken here. It's not just any panther. It's a peacock, rainbow-colored panther. Just the limitless imagination that is seen in that world and in those characters. I also, up until very recently, had never been before as a player. In our home game, in one of our home games, we recently ventured to the Feywild, but that was the first time. And so just the unexpected, and it is I'm going to word this so poorly, so just bear with me for just a hot minute. I did not come into D&D being familiar with D&D, not the worlds, not the characters outside of, or the monsters outside of mass media things. But the Feywild contains things that I'm familiar with, fairies and magic, as it ties to things that I am more familiar with from stories and folktale and fairy tales. And so it was the thing that I knew something about to be excited about. I hope that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. That's one of the things I like about it as well. And especially, like, I tried really hard, because when it became obvious to me that we had two of our characters who had some kind of connection to the Feywild, and I realized that I had also started our home game, this home campaign in which you and RA both play, that is very Fey themed. Like our first campaign, it was all undead all the time. This campaign is very Fey themed. And I was a little worried, well, this is going to get repetitive. And also, can I come up with two different storylines worth of Feywild material? And so with what I tried to do, and what's wonderful about the Feywild is that it's very easy to do this, is I just tried to make this Feywild in Khyber Shards entirely different in its essence from the Feywild in our home game, in the Frontier. Because, like this one, the whole idea of you get there by hearing stories told in this precise magical way,
which
that was entirely love. I'm so happy with that idea, and I'm so happy with the way it played off, and the couple of comments that I've gotten about it have been very positive. I really liked that scene. But that notion of the Feywild as essentially an infinite stack of individual stories is very cool to me, Partly because, you know, like you say, it really can be anything. You can now have a layer of the Feywild that's any genre of fairy tale. When we move into the next Feywild layer, is it going to be, you know, very traditional Eastern European Grimm's fairy tales, or is it going to be like American West tall tale sort of Feywild? Are we going to step into an anime?
Right.
With Japanese folklore and that kind of thing. And it's when you think of, when I started thinking of each layer as like the layers have subgenres, like the Feywild is the land of fairy, but fairy tale exists in every culture. And so you pull these very non-Western things in, or non-European things in, and, or mash them all together. And you get all sorts of weird environments that you can do that really not a lot of other, you know, all the other, not necessarily, but a lot of the other extraplanar locations that you go in D&D, they have a really clear flavor. Like if we're going to go into the realm of the dead, there's some expectation to it.
Right.
Whereas Feywild, it's going to be weird. But is it going to be, you know, Grimm's fairy tales weird? Is it going to be Lewis Carroll weird? Is it going to be Tim Burton weird? Which flavor of that is it going to be?
Which only increased my excitement for it.
Yeah.
I love fairy tales. Even one of my units that I teach is we read fairy tales from different cultures. I find that fascinating. The similarities, the differences, and quite frankly, the weirdness. That's a huge appeal of the Feywild to me. That is fun. Also, I didn't even think about how conscientious you were about us going into the Feywild and trying to vary it up. It definitely did not feel the same. It was an absolutely completely different experience. So that was very kind of you. I will always choose to go to the Feywild. If that is an option. It was so much fun. And the home game adventure and then this adventure just both absolutely met and exceeded expectations.
Oh, good. I like it as a DM because I work really hard as a DM not to railroad, not to force into a particular narrative. And in a Feywild thing where you've defined the Feywild as you've just stepped into a story, you get to subvert that expectation on the players. Like I think it was really funny to me, and I really wish I'd had Puzzle Dust comment on it more, because Puzzle Dust is a wonderful character to have, to just make random snarky comments in at the players. But I should have had Puzzle Dust comment on it more. But in the most recent episode, you could see the players, or the characters, not necessarily the players, but the characters not sinking in. We've walked into a storybook, because Ari's doing the typical D&D character thing of, I'm going to get every single piece of information from this character beforehand. And what I thought I really ought to have done is I ought to have had her come to the end of her available dialogue and fall into a loop. Because this is a story character. Like, she exists in this story. She's alive, but only within the world of this story, and doesn't have infinite information for you. She knows enough to get you on the path. But I really should have had Puzzle Dust make some sort of comment of like, no, you're in a story. Look, there's literally a path.
Right.
Tally ho, right?
I think it was the third time we asked, like, in what direction is that? In which it was like, the only direction to go. It's along the path. It's the same direction as the tendrils. It's
the heart tree and the temple of the heart tree might be in the same place.
Right. No, the players definitely were not picking up what you were very intentionally laying down.
But that was delightful to me, because this world doesn't work like a world. So your characters have just walked into it. Why would they be prepared to just shift their whole way of operating? So it was very fun to me. And it feels narcissistic, but I never make myself laugh, but playing Puzzle Dust, I absolutely make myself laugh constantly. There's definitely a moment a couple of episodes back when Puzzle Dust is being talked into going with you, where when I was editing it, I can see my face start to laugh as I'm speaking. But in this one, editing it, like the argument between Puzzle Dust and Ari about why Puzzle Dust can't tell you the end of the story is just wonderful.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, it is just, like you said, it's a place where you can do, where the rules no longer apply. It's storybook logic. So because the story, that's why it's because the story.
It's, my dad always says, if something happens in a movie and it's illogical, you're like, why did that happen? That makes no sense. His response is always, well, the script said so.
Right.
And that's just a fun MacGuffin in here. Well, the story said so. Doesn't matter if you think it makes sense. And we were commenting before we started recording how hard it is to not talk ahead because this arc was so fun. Yes, it was.
And gets so delightfully crazy in all of the right ways. So I'm super excited to edit. Editing is fine. I've gotten it down to a pattern. It doesn't take me a huge amount of time, but I'm not usually like excited to sit down and edit the episode. I'm really excited to sit down and edit these episodes because it's such good D&D. We had such a good D&D session.
It was really good. I'm excited to see them. Yeah. I just, your original question was about why I like the Feywild, and the characters I tend to play are ones who I enjoy breaking typical social rules. I've talked a little bit about this, but I tend to be fairly reserved in the real world, and overly cautious. And so it is fun to break those rules. And I think the Feywild is just an extension of that. Like you said, it gets to break the typical D&D rules. There just aren't any, unless they're self-imposed. They follow stories. But that, yes. The last recordings of episodes have been an absolute blast. And I think the viewers are going to really love them.
I hope so. So speaking of things in the Feywild, we had a question from Laura for Casey.
I keep trying to push my glasses up.
Laura asks, how delightful was it for Shade to shift so hard? Did you know or expect something like that to happen?
It was spectacularly wonderful. I did not know it was going to happen. I absolutely loved it. Did I expect it? I don't know that I go into the Feywild expecting anything. I was excited about the unexpected happening. But no, I didn't know it was going to happen beforehand. I thought it was very much fun. And then the reactions of her friends to this, much more fox looking Shade was fun too. And I think she enjoys that. The idea of fitting even more into the forest. Oh, that's her little forest queen heart right there.
I think that was going to be my follow-up question to this, was what would Shade think of her fox form, or more foxish form?
In the Feywild, I think she loves it. I think that sort of a more outward representation of the feralness that she feels, the connection with the woods that she feels, she would absolutely love. I think that we haven't seen her shift a whole lot outside of the Feywild, And I think she would be more hesitant there. Just, she doesn't love to stand out. And the more she looks like a walking, talking fox, the more that's going to stand out. And so I think she would be much more reserved and nervous about it. I think location matters.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. Well, I guess it's kind of like Cal. Cal is extremely noticeable and stands out like a sore thumb in the world, in the material world, but in the Feywild, everything else is as vibrant as Cal, and so he matches. Someone in the watch party was commenting that they hated the thought that like Cal appeared normal and dull in the Feywild, and that's not what I meant. What I meant is everything around Cal is as crazy as Cal, and so he fits here. It's not that he's lost any of the vibrancy of his appearance. It's just that it fits here instead of sticking out. Yeah,
is as vibrant and beautiful as he is. No, I think as much as I love Cal, because obviously he is spectacular, I think that made me, just as a player, want to go to the Feywild if it existed. Like, ooh.
The thing in my head in the Feywild is, I remember when, this is crazy because it's just real, but I remember when the Planet Earth series first came out, and on video, and I was living with Eric and Colin actually at the time in college, and one of them had just acquired a Blu-ray player because this was still pretty new, and we had gotten Planet Earth on a Black Friday deal on Blu-ray, and we just sat there and watched the Jungle episode, and on their nice TV, and then on Blu-ray, and it was just so green. It was like too green, and you look at it, this can't be the way real things look living in Texas, where our natural state is brownish green prairie with some nice flowers, but we don't do vibrant greens in our part of the world. And so seeing that, and just everything and all the animals and everything is just so vibrantly, intensely colored, that's what was in my head in both in Cal and in the layer of the Feywild that I took you to this time.
Really cool.
It is just this over extraordinary level of alive. And then I got to go to Costa Rica with our school one year, and it really is, the jungle really is that green. It's absurd.
Oh, I was thinking that the other day, the story about you being followed by an ocelot that you just like threw out there and we just went right past. Is there more to that story that you can share?
Not a lot. Costa Rica is, just north of Panama. And so the geography is, you've got coast, mountains. And so when I went with a Spanish trip of the school, which I got to do just because I was one of like 3 people at the school who spoke any Spanish. And so my really not very good Spanish was sufficient to get me on the sponsor list.
Better than 0.
Yeah. And we started out in the middle, and then we went down to the Pacific coast and went along the Pacific coast, and then went back up and over to the Caribbean coast. And when we were up in the mountains, which Costa Rica is just absurd, because along the coast you have jungle, and then you go up into the mountain and you're in what they call a cloud forest, because you're up where it's constantly misty, but the trees are still jungly. And so you get a lot more monkeys and things like that. But we went down into this little valley that was really known for having a lot of this kind of bird that's native to the area, the quetzal. And we went on a hike looking for quetzales, and we didn't see any. But I was walking behind the students, because we've been going up and down hills, and I was walking along behind the students, and we were walking on this really narrow path with really high grass on either side, in this really narrow mountain valley, and I kept hearing stuff in the grass. And at one point I looked over and, you get a little nervous, and I sort of looked behind, and then this, a couple feet off the ground, probably no, not even a couple feet off the ground, like a foot off the ground, this little gold and black cat head pokes out onto the path and looks at me, and I sort of kept walking along because obviously an ocelot's not actually going to hunt me, so I'm not so worried about this anymore. But it kind of kept walking along with us. And then I went for my camera, and it left.
Oh.
But yes, briefly for a few minutes, an ocelot was following me.
That is awesome.
In the tall grass.
You could have befriended it and brought it home to be your pet.
Right? Obviously. That's how it works. That's how international air travel goes.
Yeah. And wild animals. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just needed to cast animal friendship, and it would have been fine.
Right.
Yeah. Our other question is a Casey question, not a Shade question, from Mia. It's actually 3 questions. So first, how long have you been playing D&D? I keep trying to do this math, and I can't.
Calculated that before this recording.
It's the year we moved into this house. So it's got to be 8, 9 years almost.
Wow.
It can't be, it's got to be 8. It's got to be 8 because, yeah, it can't be 9. It's got to be 8 years.
Okay.
That we have been playing D&D together.
8 years, Mia.
Have you ever DM'd?
I have not.
Yet.
Yeah. At this point in my D&D experience, I am closer to saying yes to that than I was at the beginning. But my major concerns are, 1, I can't take myself seriously. Like, even in this show, in which Shade is not a particularly funny character, I break constantly. And so as a DM, I just feel like I would need to hold up note cards with, like, this is what the NPC says to you when you talk to it. The other thing is, and I this would definitely be self-imposed nervousness on my part, is I'm terrible at voices. I'm terrible at voices. And you have done a really good job about assuring your players that that isn't what makes a character. But I mean, golly jeepers, it really does add a whole lot to it. When you do those character voices, it just absolutely brings those characters to life. RA is really good with that too. When he DMs, he's just so good with the character voices, and it really does help make them more rounded. And so I feel guilt that I am not good at it and self-conscious about it, that it would limit it a little bit. And then I think I would need to do a dungeon crawl as my first one. I know what is present. I know what can happen. Just limiting the aspects of it I would need to do, but I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. New DM, absolutely a clear, finite sort of adventure, and obviously it should be set in the Feywild.
Yes. Yeah. I might love that. Yeah.
Well, and then you don't have to take yourself seriously.
That's true. I love storytelling enough that it is becoming more tempting to try. I love stories, and I love this collaborative storytelling that we get to do together.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly hope you will eventually try, because I'll get to play in that game, and it will be fun.
Thank you.
And then Mia's last question. Assuming there is a similarity to video games in this respect, have you ever gotten any grief for being a woman playing a stereotypically male game?
I have not yet. I have to be honest, it's something that I was really worried about. When you first asked me, I did not immediately say, sounds great, let's do it, I'm in. I said, are you sure? Was my first reaction, because I was a little worried that it was just niceties. And once you assured me that, yes, you genuinely meant the question, then I probably thought about it for another week and a half. And I think I mentioned this in a previous KSA, but I honestly was not, I still hadn't really decided until we did the first meetup, all 5 of us together. Because I had met Eric before, but I had never met Colin. And putting yourself out there is hard. Putting yourself out there as a female in a male-dominated area is intimidating. And so I was nervous about what could come of that. And you know, we don't have a large viewing, and I think that has absolutely contributed to the fact that nobody has ever made a comment about it. There hasn't been anything inappropriate or even edging on rude. Our viewers are super patient and super supportive and super kind, and I am so thankful for that. I was nervous about it because I don't know if I've talked about this. My background is actually technical theater. So I went to college for designing and constructing sets, which is a predominantly male job and field. And I got a lot of comments that people were comfortable telling me to my face, sexist comments about what I could and couldn't do because I was a woman in this field. And I enjoy proving people wrong. Like that's a thing I like, and I am confident enough that it did not deter me from continuing in that vein. My decision to be a teacher instead of working in that field was 100% up to me. But I know what people are capable of saying, and I know what people can conclude. Sorry, Calcifer is over here watching the very still mouse on my monitor. She looks like she's trying to hunt here. And so I was nervous, but no, y'all are really kind, and I'm really grateful for that. And this is really the only thing I put myself out there like that. I have only played D&D games with good friends. And I have great friends. None of my friends have implied that I couldn't do something. We play with very, very gracious and encouraging people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I read that question and I was thinking about my experience of D&D, because that thing of it's a male dominated thing, it's statistically true, but it's weirdly not been true in my little sphere experience. The first person who brought up D&D to me was a good friend of mine in college who's a woman. The first group I played D&D with had I think an even split of men and women, and then my home game, since I started playing D&D regularly again with you and RA, has been either evenly split or majority female. That's true, yeah. And so I've been lucky to not actually encounter that side of D&D, even though it's not the side of D&D that gets turned against me, but it's nice to hear questions like that and think through my experience of D&D, where it's not turned against me, and think, no one I've ever played with has been that kind of jerk. That's really nice.
That is really nice. Well, particularly because I'm closest to you and RA in the group that we play with, and I get the impression from Eric and Colin, like, that's not something y'all would tolerate either.
Right.
And so if it is something that came up around y'all, I'm not on my own defending that. I feel supported in this community.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that no one's ever given you any grief about it. Like, I don't understand the motive for that. I want less people to play this game I love.
Right.
But yeah, it's out there. I have the only real encounter I've seen with it is in starting tweeting for Khyber Shards. Not anything directed at me, but now, of course, Twitter thinks the only thing I'm interested in is D&D, which is fine with me. But there's multiple sub threads to D&D on the internet, and some of it's unpleasant. So it's definitely out there, but I'm glad that you have not encountered it. I'm glad that our viewership does not contain it or seem to so far. And you're probably right. That's probably is a benefit of the size of our viewership being relatively small. But it's still nice.
It is. It's very nice. Yeah. I have put some pressure on myself. Like, I have thought about it before as, am I doing characters that are too much an archetype or a stereotype? But I also know that's something I put on myself. I think it was Darren that talked about just how forgiving the Eberron fans in general are. And I have definitely noticed that.
Yeah. Well, and Eberron's such a good setting in that one of the main goals of the setting is let's subvert the classic fantasy expectation in some interesting way. And so it naturally draws a fan base that likes that. So it's fun. I don't think Shade's a stereotype, and I don't think any of our viewers do. Just in case I've never said that out loud, I very much don't think Shade is a stereotype.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. That is all of our questions. So thank you, Casey, for your insights and thoughts, and thank you to our viewers for your questions and for the very supportive community that we've got following this show. That's really anything about being small that's discouraging is more than made up for by the encouragement and support that we get from the people that are watching. So it is, we love it. So thank you so much for the support, for the encouragement, and for watching. And new episodes of Khyber Shards will drop every Monday. New episodes of Khyber Shards Answers drop on Fridays. And until next time, thanks for rolling with us.